Good morning, everybody. This is Lizzie and Justin, as always, on a Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. We are here live as Turning Towards Life, which is a third space project. We're thrilled, as always, to be doing this in the midst of our ordinary lives. I'm away for the weekend at the moment in Suffolk, and my internet was just completely down because we had a massive rainstorm. So I'm in a slightly kind of ropey internet area, and also kind of perching on the edge of a sofa and feeling my way into how to do this when I'm kind of not particularly set up for it. So I'm feeling slightly kind of out of my normal thing, but we know now that that's fine with Turning Towards Life, that we can be in amongst our normal, ordinary lives wherever we are in the world, and somehow we've managed to do it every week for over a year now, which is amazing. So we are talking about Justin's lovely source, The Midlife Journey, today by Jet Saris. And I feel very held and supported by this wonderful conversation that we're going to have.
So morning, Lizzie, and morning, everyone. I'm also, as always, delighted to be here and to be doing this and to feel the gathering possibilities that there are around this project. And like you said, Lizzie, one of the delights of this is that we are completely nakedly, unrehearsedly, always live. And that's a huge part of the point, is coming into this with as much genuineness and spontaneity as we can. So we'll have to see how we go with your internet connection and see what happens. So the source that I have chosen for this week is from Jet Saris's book, Hidden Blessings, which has the subtitle Midlife Crisis as a Journey of Awakening. And it's a fabulous and beautiful book. And what I've done here is taken some of the parts of her opening chapter and edited them together, because she writes in a very generous style that doesn't lend itself easily to small quotes. So these are bits and pieces assembled from her introduction to the whole topic. And a couple of reasons for bringing this today. One is, I think this is everyone's topic wherever we are in our lives in one way or another, although it shows up particularly at certain life stages for different people. But the other thing I want to say just before we begin is partly what's inspired this is that our very dear friend and colleague Nina, who is one of the partners in Third Space, and our very good friend Sophie Howarth are putting on a one-year program in the UK, which is intended to be a deep exploration of midlife, and it is starting in the year and still open for application. So we are going to post some information about it in the Third Space. No, I mean in the Turning Towards Life Facebook group after this morning's call, and you'll also be able to find it at thirdspacecoaching.com. So if you're at all inspired by anything that we're talking about to take up a deeper exploration of these topics, how about that? There are some people who really care about this who are making something available. So I'm going to dive in and read this source, Lizzie. It's called The Midlife Journey. Generally, we cannot take the midlife journey before midlife. It takes actual life experience for our constructed self, our ego, to mature. And paradoxically, it takes ego strength to go through ego dissolution. We have to have the strong ego built during the first half of our lives in order to make the midlife transformation, because the ego must involve itself in its own metamorphosis by failing to take us. I'm going to read this again. The ego must involve us in its own metamorphosis by failing to take us into the next stage of life. The impulse to avoid the journey is understandable. Many of us will cling to our old lives while looking for a guarantee that new lives are possible and will be better. Even as the old well is drying up, we try to maintain our lives until the passage disables us altogether, or we rearrange the furniture of our lives to try and make things better. We trade in an old spouse for a fresher model, or scurry out of our own lives into someone else's in hopes of reviving the selves we have known up until this point. When we arrive at midlife, torn, confused, desperate, burned out, unmotivated, or fearful, what we don't yet understand is that there isn't any more life force in our old habits and patterns because we have used it all up. A new direction is needed. It's unimaginable to us that the old system is actually not repairable. But at midlife, we undergo radical change. Our old way of being is not something we can tweak and rejuvenate. We need to start over from the ground up. It's not an opportunity for a fresh start, it is a mandate for one. Carl Jung wrote, "We walk in shoes too small for us." If we resist the call to transform at midlife, all the makeup, money, and medications in the world won't stem our grief over having aborted the possibility of living the authentic, soul-centered life that belongs uniquely to us.
Mm. So I'm just going to read the last paragraph, Justin. When we arrive at midlife, torn, confused, desperate, burned out, unmotivated, or fearful, what we don't yet understand is that there isn't any more life force in our old habits and patterns because we've used it all up. A new direction is needed. It is unimaginable to us that the old system is actually not repairable. But at midlife, we undergo radical change. Our old way of being is not something we can tweak and rejuvenate. We need to start over from the ground up. It's not an opportunity for a fresh start. It's a mandate for one. Carl Jung wrote, "We walk in shoes too small for us." If we resist the call to transform at midlife, all the makeup, money, and medications in the world won't stem our grief over having aborted the possibility of living the authentic, soul-centered life that belongs uniquely to us.
I'm very aware of being in the midst of all of this. So it's very, for me, very powerful, and this book is very powerful. And it's powerful in many ways, but the one that strikes me most immediately now is this sense that Jet Saris is talking about of there are times in our lives and midlife, which she says is sometime between our mid-30s to our 60s. Very often. It's so helpful to know that in those moments, or maybe long periods, where it feels like everything's falling apart, and our attempts to get everything back into the way it was, which has been the way I've wanted to go so many times, is let me just get my life back in order. Let me understand things the way that I used to, or probably most powerfully for me, falling into the trap of desperately trying to feel like I used to. Like I'll know the familiar feel of my life. If I just do this and this and this, then I can settle and life will feel as it did.
Mm.
To be reminded that very often what's happening is a kind of falling apart of a way of being in the world that we've known, and the birth of something that can't be known in advance, even if it looks the same from the outside, which it sometimes can do. But there's a kind of at least this is my experience, is like the mush or the soup on the inside of a chrysalis when a caterpillar goes into a chrysalis. And my understanding of this is that caterpillars basically dissolve. It's not like the eyes become the eyes and they dissolve and then something new begins to form. Anyway, I found it so helpful when I can remember that this may well be what's happening, rather than trying to claw my life back into shape. And very often when I feel afraid, as I often do, I think what I feel afraid about is I'm not in charge here. I don't know what's being born, and something's wrong. And I suppose I've had enough glimpses of the kind of changes that are possible at various other times in life to get that. Very often my sense of something terrible is happening is way misplaced.
Mm. Yeah. It's really funny reading this because the territory for me is very, very familiar, but this has been happening to me for like ever. So I get that there's a midlife thing, and it makes me really curious as to like there might be those of us who everything's been pretty smooth until we hit our midlife or something, and then there's those of us, and somebody made a comment under the source about the quarter life crisis as well, and so all these things I know probably most intimately from my early to mid 20s, and it's so clear, the memory of it all. And of course, everything's breaking down all the time for me now as well. But it seems like, the part where it says, the ego has to be strong in order to allow, or built in order to be able to allow its own dissolution. I feel like it's a very interesting question for me because I think very early on, I felt thrown into not knowing what way was up and what on earth to do with myself, and not having many sources of this kind of thing at all, finding my way to doing something that was helpful, which I think is part of the reason this is so beautiful, that this source is here and Jet is speaking in this way, and Nina and Sophie are going to be doing work on this as well, because I think these phases of not knowing who we are and what to do next are so intense. And even just the thought that someone else might have something to say that's helpful, or that there's a light that you can't see right now, but someone else is standing for it or holding it, is so important, because it really does feel like our egos are strong enough to break down when they do. And I remember someone saying to me once, you can never be given in your life circumstance something that you're not ready for. Your readiness is implicit in the thing happening in the first place. And of course, we can't see that because we just feel broken and confused, and we don't know what to do with ourselves, and we can't find a way, and it all feels confounding, and our rational mind has sliced the whole of thing to pieces for doom or whatever it's done. And there's a way that those lights in those moments are like literally like little life rafts or big life rafts that help us find our way through. And it feels really important that these conversations happen. And for me, I think there's a big amount of shame in it as well, because we're often in a point in our lives where we kind of should have this all sorted or something, wherever we are in our lives, whether we're 50 or 20 or 32. There are expectations of each of those phases. And when the ground shifts, and when we now no longer have the orientation points that we thought we should have, it's like everyone's got it and I haven't feels like a big part of this journey as well. Of our ego wants to know that we're the same as everyone else somehow to feel safe. And this kind of sets us apart, because everybody's midlife journey, everybody's journey of opening into something new, into something different, into something deeper, isn't the same. And so the togetherness in it, I know I'm always the one harking on about the togetherness, but all roads lead back to it.
Yeah.
And this is a massive example of where that's true, that we can be together in this, finding out how small our shoes are for us is a together thing, not a alone thing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so with you. And I feel I have felt like this for a long time, and I think it's something that we've got really committed to, Lizzie, and that Third Space is also about, which is that none of us can really do this alone. Even though our own particular paths through it in a way are ours uniquely, it's also true that we can't navigate this alone, and that we're taking a stand for something that has for a long time. I think things are changing on this in many ways, but has been for a long time very invisible in our culture, which has largely prioritized the sovereign self, the navigating, I'm the king or queen of my own life, and really separate from everyone else. And the most I can do, I was reading, there was a fantastic satirical article I was reading this week about, I can't remember what the word for this was, but, there's a huge industry of people on Instagram, particularly, and Facebook, showing us how perfect their lives are. Like, I get up at 3 a.m. and I meditate for 3 hours, and I eat a bowl of chia seeds, and and then I run up the hills, and I look so beautiful. And that in our culture has taken, it's so funny when you think about it, but it has taken the place of elders, and it's taken the place of community. Like, where we really need to find this is by being with one another, not with some remote sort of, I was going to say confectionery, constructed superstar of the enlightened life or something. That the place that we navigate these incredibly challenging transitions is both by, as you say, having, and I was thinking elders, having people around us, close in if we can. Books are wonderful. Jet Harris's book is amazing, but also people we can speak to, who can feel their bodily presence, and who can say to us, I know what life looks like from here.
Yeah.
I can tell you something about this passage that you're in without telling you specifically what yours is. So we've, by dismantling so many of the community structures in our lives, we've distanced ourselves from elders, and then we need fellow travelers. We need people who we can say to one another, I'm really afraid, and I don't know what's going on, or I'm finding myself trying to claw my life back into its previous shape, and simply someone else who can say, I hear you, or maybe even me too. And I don't want to romanticize past ages, because they had all of their own troubles too. It's not like we have a monopoly on trouble or something. But we could really do with making community, listening deeply to one another, valuing the depth and wisdom of people who've gone ahead of us, which also means upending this whole crazy ageism thing we have in our culture, like really trusting the wisdom of people who've gone before, so that, because without all of this, and also I think in the face of the the Instagram celebrity kind of culture that we're in, when we encounter the deep confusion and pain and and sort of uprooting that comes in any of these transitions, whether it's a quarter life one or a midlife one, or one that has no name because it doesn't occur at a particular point, without any of that, the only models that we have is the life I had before, which I have to get back to, or the image of perfection which is all around me. And as I keep on finding out seems true, and I know that Jet writes about this a lot, mostly it's allowing ourselves to fall apart. That is the work here, not trying to get anything, and certainly not trying to get perfect or together, or that's not where any of what's going to happen comes from.
No, and I think one of the bits that I feel that kind of calls out to me is what happens when we resist the call to transform. So there's a call that happens, we can feel it, it's scary, we resist it, and one of the ways that we resist it is just saying makeup, money, medication. that list can go on and on and on, of knowing that there's this nagging thing that wants us to turn towards it, and we are afraid, and so we do everything we can to avoid and resist whatever that calling to us is or means. And it's kind of accepting that none of those things, like whatever the mechanisms we have, like working harder or doing more shopping or improving the way we look, or whatever the kind of outer manifestations are that are the response to the call, in a way, that there are kind of unsophisticated, fearful responses to the call, which are all ridiculously legitimate as well. It's really scary. And I think this invitation is to stop for a minute, look at the ways that we're kind of compensating or acting out of some kind of feeling of resistance to something deeper that we know is calling us. We all feel the kind of the nagging, oh God, I think I have to look at this thing, or I think I have to turn towards something. And to be able to turn towards that. And sometimes life is like, I'm not even going to let you fanny around with this. You're turning towards this. You know, sometimes our circumstance, like a breakup or something happening in our family or money issues or something, goes, no, you don't get any time to fanny around with this anymore. You are turning towards this. And other times it's like, so sometimes we don't have a choice, and other times it feels like we do have a choice. And I feel like the invitation here is to consider that turning towards this thing in reality is kind of the only option if you want to live a life that feels like your own, and you don't really want to be in this painful limbo forever of fakery and pretending and being held together when actually inside you're falling apart. And that's the invitation I'm receiving from this, is we don't want to have the aborted possibility of living a life. All of us have a yearning for the life that's ours. And Justin, I love what you said before about being people who can't necessarily articulate the exact specifics of your own crisis or your own process, but who can point to the territory enough that you feel like someone gets you. I think that's the whole deal. Like if I can feel that from you, I'm willing to see that I'm compensating with shopping or eating or whatever I'm doing. And I can kind of go, okay, well, if this person's kind of got a handle on what the hell's going on, I'm willing to turn towards them in this moment and ask for help and ask for support and be in community about it. And I think that's really the deal with this inquiry, is being able to turn towards something that feels terrifying and frightening and not knowing what to do, and remembering it's probably an extended process as well. It's not like an overnight thing, which is another reason why biological beings, not technology, is really important, because it goes on. And human beings are really good at longevity and being there over a long period of time with something different than short gains. And so I feel really opened actually by this source and glad of it and the conversation that it brings.
What's very much in mind for me is something you said about what it is that we have to turn towards. And I'm afraid that I'm going to bring in the imagery of vomiting here. Unpleasant as it might sound, but I was thinking, as you were talking about bodily processes that we might try and avoid, and something like that, which can feel so physically unpleasant. And I know my own body, so many times in my life when I've known something has to happen, and I've wanted to. The reason I'm saying it this way is because for me, this is the best description of the moment of turn that I know is called for, where I go, no, 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 I won't, and I'm using my body and my emotions and my mind to resist what's actually here. And then there comes a point where either you get forced to, you're no longer in control of things, or you go, I get it, I don't want to turn this way. So it could be that, or it could be telling the truth, like you were to move off that territory and into something else. You were saying a moment before that there's this way in which we so easily and so understandably get into, I can feel myself falling apart, I can feel something coming, and I'll hold on in exactly that way to go, I'm fine, at least I know this one, I'm fine, I'm really fine, I'm really fine. And then that realization that one of three things is going to happen. Either I'm going to pretend I'm fine until I die, which, by the way, I know from my own body and things that happened to me a few years ago, that very often that is exactly the thing that puts us at risk physically, in terms of serious illness, puts us at risk. Or, I know I said there were going to be three things, but I can't remember what the third thing is, but the second one is, I know what it is. The second one is, or I'm going to choose to participate in the process, which is going to mean starting to open myself to it and talking to people about it. I'm not fine. I am really confused. Everything I've understood myself as falling apart. The strategies I've used to hold my life together aren't working out. Or life will force us into that position.
Yes. One
of those three things is going to happen. And increasingly, I know that the first one, which is holding on and pretending, more and more I can see how that doesn't work out. And like you're saying, if we can get ourselves into the position where there are people around us, I think that the minimum is somebody who will hear us tell the truth about ourselves. And even more than that is community, where we can tell the truth about ourselves, which has people who've been at different stages, cross-generational community. So there are people who know the territory, but the minimum is finding a way to tell the truth and finding somebody that we can do this with, so that we're in relationship. And I think I know it's incredibly difficult to go through this passage that Jet is talking about and not be unnecessarily injured by it. If we're not working on that relational part of it.
It feels really, I'm feeling really like this is really big, and it's really okay. And that, however we're feeling in this conversation of what it evokes and what it might be pointing to, just this reassurance of all of the people in the world who have written, run workshops, done therapy, run processes for. The world is so well resourced, like you said about the elders. There is so much going on where we could reach out and receive support. And sometimes I just look at my bookshelf and just go, if all these people have written all these books and these are all the titles, there's somewhere to go. Like, I'm not alone. And I feel in this moment really supported by that, and that we for each other can be that too. And, I know that having met various people now over the last year who join us, Justin, on a Sunday morning, and everyone, has their little routines of they either watch it on their wife's iPad in bed, I heard one, or they watch it on a Monday on their way to work, because they travel in a train, or whatever the routine is. There's something about that as well, that yes, it's you and I saying words, but everyone who listens and everybody who is participating in this, even without a voice other than maybe commenting, but energetically there is a group here, there is a something here. And anyone who listens and then listens again, and who doesn't just switch it off because they think we're completely bonkers, are all in some way knitted together by these conversations. And we have community here, and that's really precious and really important. And I don't know how many people, I don't know the stats freshly, but I think we're over 700 people or something who around the world are in these inquiries together. And these conversations wouldn't mean anything to everybody if people weren't in these things. So in a way, already, if you be conservative, there's at least 500 people who are entertaining these kinds of questions. And whatever we're going through is what humans go through. We wouldn't be able to go through it if it wasn't a human thing to go through. And so I'm feeling that kind of support and that kind of togetherness of our own brokenness, and being in these kind of processes of falling apart and not understanding and not knowing. And that at any one time when I'm falling apart, there's a lot of people who have a kind of stability that can support me. And that feels really important as well, to know that we're not alone, and that there are people robust in their development, as we will be for others at many times, who are in support of our unfolding and deepening and growing and turning towards this amazing call.
I think that's such a beautiful place for us to stop for today, everything that you just said. We are so glad, I know, that you're all joining us. And I'll say again that if you're interested in this, a deep dive into the midlife journey, then look out in the Turning Towards Life Facebook group. We'll post details of the program that Nina and Sophie are up to immediately after this conversation. And we will be back next week for something new and different and the same, all at the same time.
Yes. Bye, everybody.
See you then. Bye-bye.